Life has many seasons. They come, they go. And if we understand that about life is a little bit easier to navigate, breaking it up into different seasons and being able to look at the effect of each season, what happened, the responses, the outcomes, and even what we experienced in the season. But I especially want to talk about how sometimes there is a merging of different things in one season. Bad weather, if you will. This is Barry with FatherSeekers, and this is the podcast, Teach Me to Father. One of the things about life we have to grab hold to is the idea that there are not hacks, but there are rules that we have to utilize and to break up the monotony of life. Sometimes seasons are just that. Seasons are that little piece that helps us understand that this thing we're walking through right now will not last forever. In other words, there is power in understanding that we are walking through life, and those breaks, those increments, those separations are seasons. And the beauty about that is we can understand that in some of the rough seasons that we're in, they won't always last forever. But that same rule applies to the good seasons that we love, we would just love to stay in and camp out in because they're restful and they're pleasant and there's not a whole lot to contend with. There's not problems. Conversely, when it's a rough season, we feel like it's going to last forever. And there are different time periods in the seasons of life. Today, I want to capture this idea, this concept, that we live our lives in seasons, but also there are things to learn. There are things to gather and to get from each season. I want to talk to you about the power of seasons. One of the beauties about this whole idea is that there's always going to be a transition coming. In other words, we're not stuck here. We're not stuck in an endless loop where things are going to be horrible from now on. The new passes and becomes old, and then the old passes, and then there's a new season. But I think there are pieces about this seasonal thing, this seasonal idea, that we can gather and gain some wisdom through. And one of those things is that when we're in a season of difficulty and challenge, we have to do things not to survive, but to get through it and to fulfill the responsibilities that were required. So I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about when we're in that season. We've just entered. It's difficult. We know it. And the only thing that we're looking for is the end. We're looking for the transition out of this season into a different season. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes it just doesn't happen fast. And sometimes it could be weeks that seem like years, or it could be years. There's power in seasons. And I want to point out that power today. I want to point out how not only we can access it, not only how we can utilize it, but also how we can help our family, our friends, and our loved ones walk through difficult seasons. I tend to get into a season, and if it's difficult, the first thing that I want to do is to go cave dwell because I don't have the energy to deal. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be that way, even though the tendency is there. But what I want us to look at right now is how when you're in a difficult season, same rules apply for a great season. is that we have to do some assessment and inventory and sober analysis. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that? One of the ways that you do that is when you begin to know and you are clearly in a different season. One of the things that we have to do is to not shut down or fall under pressure. Even if we are crawling along and making our way, we have to keep moving. Now, sometimes there are places and seasons where we have to pause and we have to stop. But I want to talk to you about not only the assessment of inventory of what's happening in the season, but soberly and analyze it. And sometimes that requires help. But first we have to do it. We have to notice what's happening in us, because we're the only ones who know what's going on the inside. One of the ways that we look at this, one of the ways that we can gain power from the season is that not only are there varying lengths, not only are there courses that we have to run, we have to go through the season. You just can't stop. Life is seasonal. But we have to look at a couple of things, not just the length, but the profit and the loss, the purpose and the refinement of seasons. Well, let me say that again. When we're in a season, we have to look at the purpose and the refinement, the profits and the losses of the season. Now, knowing full well that seasons differ in length, they differ in the courses that they run, there is always knowledge and insight and wisdom and understanding to gain from those seasons. And we will never be able to do that unless we understand that seasons are part of life. They require assessment. They require inventory. They require sober analysis. I want to look at a couple of benefits of seasons. Learning the nature of a season will help us navigate the season. Now, we have to learn and we have to plan for our season, but we have to prepare. Then we have to sow, grow, and reap. There are seasons that come in our lives that are unnecessary. My good friend Scott Van talks about often unnecessary seasons, those things that we bring upon ourselves, those things whereby we do things that are foolish and just not smart, and we bring on ourselves unnecessary seasons. I'm not talking about that. We're going to do a podcast about that later, unnecessary seasons. But right now, I'm talking about the seasons of life that we find ourselves in, that we are moving through. Now, if you didn't know that our life runs in seasons, this should be refreshing for you to know that misery and problems won't last forever, nor will success and plenty. There will always be challenge. There will always be difficulty. The idea is to learn and to figure out the processes of moving through, of getting through, of doing what's right, of making the best of the season. And I can't emphasize that enough. Making the best of the season you're in, because there is so much wisdom to get so that the next season won't be as difficult. Now, there are three things that happen in a season. There's change, there's growth, and then there's preparation. Now, if we've prepared, we know life is difficult, it's challenging, it's wonderful, it's celebratory. There's lack, there's plenty, there's hurt, there's pain, there's joy. But knowing the things that we can plan for are so important. We have to plan for what we know is going to come. In seasons, though, there are unpredictable elements, and those unpredictable elements are people, the weather of the season that you're in, maybe a financial or a physical challenge, maybe a passing of a loved one. All sorts of things happen in season. But some of the season we can plan for. When we're talking about getting the best out of the season, we want to get the best out of it. In other words, we can't just throw away a season because it's difficult. We can't just get so sucked up into celebration of a great season that we get soft and hope that the rest of our lives will be like this. knowing full well it won't. I think we disappoint ourselves sometimes. We actually cause ourselves pain by having unmet expectations in a season that it's just not real. It's just not going to happen that way. There's some unpredictabilities about life. I will tell you, I will be the first that much of the difficult seasons that I've experienced in my life were unpredictable. Now, some were predictable, like physical challenge that I had. Very predictable. I knew the train was coming. I knew the end was going to be near, unless there was a miracle that took place, and one miracle did take place. To God be the glory. But we disappoint ourselves, and how we do that is we hope against hope for foolishness. Don't be foolish in hoping against hope. Now, what does that mean, hope against hope? We live in a real world, and we all have experience in it. And some of the experiences that we have, we choose to ignore sometimes. For example, if you're like me, you hate inconvenience. Inconvenience, and this is a thing that I'm working on, is inconvenience just rattles me sometimes because I'm so busy, strike one, that inconvenience pitches me off course and off task and off schedule, and I get frustrated, and then I get anxious, and then I get mad at myself, and then so you can see how that happens. But there's a rhythm to seasons, and if we can understand that rhythm, we can move within that rhythm. We can gravitate to it, and knowing full well that every season is determined. It's made for change, growth, and preparation. But some of the wisdom that we learn in season, some of that wisdom is only gained from difficulty. Some of it's gained from plenty and joy and great pain-free seasons. In other words, we have to be assessing constantly and taking inventory of what's going on and doing some really sober analysis. I can't push that enough. I can't say how important it is to keep assessment and records. And this is one of the big reasons that I love to journal, because I can track things and I can go back and read about it. Nonetheless, here are 3 things that will help you in any season to not only get the best out of the season, but to grow through and with the season. Let me say that again. I want to tell you 3 things that will help you make the best of every season, and then it will help you grow in and with and through that season so that all the following seasons are getting better. And that's one of the secrets that I want to remind you of, is that all the seasons keep getting better because we gain a little bit of ground. We get a little bit more wisdom. We get a little bit more experience. We create and learn new things about ourselves and how to deal with those things. Listen, nobody said life is going to be easy. The season that I recently walked through, my wife and I are walking through a great deal of situations that we're involved in, but they're beyond our control, and transitioning in several different areas of our lives to move from one place to another in our work. And so about a week and a half ago, we walked through this season of great depression, despair, and discouragement. Now, those on their own, they're not too hard to deal with. I mean, you can walk through that. But when there's that fused cocktail of depression, despair, and encouragement, it tends to weigh more on you than usual. And basically, here's what I learned in that. Not only did I get clarity, not only did some things that I felt were important, but were not, that were creating more weight for me. I saw the lack of importance of those things walking through this season of depression, despair, and discouragement. Now you're thinking, is that really important to have those seasons in life? Despair, discouragement, depression? Absolutely. Absolutely. They're a purging process whereby when we get depressed, our body is actually saying, hey, it's time to slow down. Let's see what's happening here. Let's back up and let's depress what's the tension, the stress, the problems, the over anxiousness, the over analyzation. Let's pull back. More than a couple of months of depression, you need to be seen and get medicated. But our bodies shut down, and that's good. But when you're in despair and you're discouraged, it seems like that there's no way out. Now, I want to tell you what I learned in that. I learned 3 things: how to walk through and use depression, despair, and discouragement to my benefit. I would say this beforehand, that despair, depression, and discouragement are great pressures upon us, but they force things out of our life that we do not need. Let me say that again. Depression, despair, and discouragement will force unnecessary things in our lives out of the way if we don't get stuck in that. And, nobody wants to be stuck there. Nobody wants to walk through that, but sometimes it's necessary. So here are the 3 things that I've learned. Number 1 is, in that season, I began to identify the things that were causing me to be depressed. Why did I do that? Why should you do that? The things that cause us to be depressed generally are the heavy, anxious weights that we bear. Get this word, hear this word, that we cannot control. Are you a control freak? In other words, for me, in my past, I try to control things to protect myself from injury. I hope you're not that way. Probably you are. If you grew up without a dad, you got a lot of that hypervigilance going on. But when you're in that difficult season, identify the things that are bringing about the depression. Write them down. And don't do it electronically. I know millennials and Gen Zs they're notoriously electronic, but write these things down. Learn them, identify them, and begin to lay definition to them. Number 2, define them. Identify them and define them. Here's an example. If business or if progress is not moving at the pace and the rate you wanted it to, there's got to be a reason, and that reason may be beyond your control. It might just be that it's part of the natural progression of things. So when you get in the middle of that and begin to identify that and begin to identify why things are not moving so fast enough for you that you planned, and it's out of your control, then there's nothing you can do about it except see how this can make me better next time. Is there something that I could have done to prevent this? And most of the time, we can always learn something to make us better, but we also learn that sometimes life is out of our control. Now, some things are in our control, but what's in our control is our response to the responsibilities that we have. If it's out of your control, it's necessary for you to find out if that's one of the things that trigger your depression. So identify that thing that's making you depressed, then define it, and then last, how are you going to steward this new information that you have? Stewardship is not just with money. It's not just with time. Stewardship is with opportunity and knowledge and wisdom and understanding and insight and discretion that we learn along the way. And how we steward that, meaning how we implement that in our lives, not only for the moment, but for the future and for things that are coming forward and for betterment in the next season. Because when you get back up into that stage of the seasons, when you are learning, you're planning, you're preparing, and then you sow, grow, and reap, that is golden. That is golden. When you understand and take the lessons learned, then you're in the beginning of the seasons, even preparatory work for seasons. You're learning and planning, and then you're preparing, and then you're sowing, growing, and reaping. So with that, I want you to understand the importance of stewarding your experience. Now, let me say this about experience. Experience is no good. I did a whole podcast on this. It absolutely, experience is not the best teacher unless it's evaluated by wiser people than you. I'll say it again, your experience is nothing more than recording what happened. If your experience is not evaluated by people who are better and smarter than you in what you're doing. I want to challenge you to jump on board with this, and I want you to go to FatherSeekers.org. I want you to know that at the time of this recording, there are so many free content pieces that you can just download. There are coaching opportunities for you to get some coaching, some initial coaching, some free consult if the blocks are open. This is Barry with Father Seekers, and this is the podcast, Teach Me to Father.